makes me wanna holler, go away. I need more peace and hope and love. Where do I find it in this crazy old world? I need strategies, strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab. Strategies for living radio. Every time I listen, Lauren and David share strategies for living, and it makes me aware. I've got strategies for living, strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab. Strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab. Strategies for living radio.
We need them. We need those strategies, don't we? Those strategies for living. So are you ready? You ready for your daily dose of radio rehab?
I'm ready.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Ready or not, here we come. Hey, folks, welcome into another edition of Strategies for Living. I'm Dr. David McMillian. She is psychotherapist, LPC Lauren Leon McMillian. One of the things that years before you and I met, I would go to, the annual conventions,
Right.
Counseling conventions, and in one of them, I got to meet Rosalind Carter. And
yes.
She famously said there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's it.
And
that's what we're here on the planet to do, right? Hopefully.
I think we are. But how do you care for yourself while caring for others?
Yeah. How do you support others without losing yourself? Right?
Absolutely. I mean,
that's the balance.
That's extremely important, and that's what our life strategist is here to talk to us about today. His name is Roy Remer. He's the executive director of Zen Caregiving Project. He's got a new book out from New World Library called Zen Caregiving: How to Care for Yourself While Caring for Others. So, I mean, how could we pass up? How could we pass up an opportunity? Because I don't know this to be a fact, but my sense says that at this time in our history, in the present, there are more caregivers, more people as caregivers than there have ever been.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I don't know that we could really have a more important topic than Roy Remer's going to bring to us today.
And like Rosalind said, we're all going to be in that category in some way or another.
Absolutely.
We'll be affected. Absolutely.
Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you being with us, and we appreciate our sponsors who make it all possible: the Robinson Film Center, and Azalea Cleaners, and Pintail Roofing, and the Balanced Life Wellness Center, Fertitta's Delicatessen, Home of the Muffy, SRT Sales Training, Uprising Addiction Center, and Mira Direct Primary Care. Come back with us. We're going to meet Roy Remer, the author of Zen Caregiving. This is going to be a very important conversation right here on Strategies for Living. Come back with us.
Tune in daily, find the light. Healthy mind and spirits bright. Strategies for living strong. Feel the vibe, it won't go wrong. The body moves and soul align. Catch the rhythm, feel the time. Radio rehab every day. Chase those clouds of gray away. Your daily dose of radio rehab. Lift you up when skies seem drab. Mind and body, spirits free. Living life in harmony.
And welcome into Strategies for Living. Lauren Leon McMillian, David McMillian. Let's welcome into the program now Roy Remer. He is an educator and end-of-life caregiver since 1997. He's executive director of Zen Caregiving Project. in San Francisco and lead creator of the Mindful Caregiving education curriculum. He's also a dedicated practitioner in the Soto Zen tradition and a student at San Francisco Zen Center. Roy, welcome to Strategies for
Hello.
Living.
Welcome.
How you doing?
Hi, David. Hi, Lauren. I'm doing great today. I want to say I love your theme song there. It's really lovely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, how did this is a beautiful book. I'll hold it up here to the radio
Thank you.
so people can see it. It's out from New World Library. It's called Zen Caregiving. And I think it's just out. It's still, well, it's not hot anymore, but it's warm here off the press. How did the
It
book?
is,
How
yeah.
did the book come to be, Roy?
Well, let's see. So, I ventured into this work in about 1997, and I was kind of minding my own business. I had a career in book publishing, as it happens. And I experienced, like all of us, sooner or later, a big death in my life.
Right.
And I was working with a couple people who were volunteers at this hospice. So I started serving at Zen Hospice Project. Anyways, eventually I joined the staff because that kind of work really changed my life. And I received the calling, if you will, And it didn't take very long before I realized that the wonderful training that I had received to become a volunteer caregiver really shouldn't be limited to our organization's volunteers. I really wanted to get it out there into the world, recognizing that so many people could benefit from these approaches.
Right.
So we created what we call mindful caregiving education. And after a few years, seeing the impact that it was having on family caregivers and paid caregivers, and given my background in publishing, I thought, I'd really like to offer these teachings in a different sort of format, that being a book. So the idea, the vision was kind of gestating or percolating there for a while. And then it became more of a priority, and I started figuring out how I wanted to organize the book and created a book proposal. And as they say, the rest was history. But one of the big goals was, really derived out of the recognition that family caregivers are really busy. So they
Yeah.
need as many different formats as possible. And if they couldn't participate in one of our classes due to time constraints, maybe they could hold a book in their hands and dip into
Right.
it when
Right.
they had the time. Yeah.
Right. One of the things we hear so much today, I'm a little concerned because we need to understand more about mindfulness. It concerns me a little because we hear it so much today. So it's one of those words that I think for some people they turn off when they hear it because they hear it so much.
Kind of lost its meaning.
Kind of, yeah. At least that's my
Right.
concern. I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm on target there or not, but I do think.
Well, I think
it's
you
so,
are.
It's so
Yeah.
important. So, what is it, and why do we need it, Roy?
Sure. And I would say, the same is true for the word Zen, but just sticking with mindfulness for the moment. And, this is kind of the culture we live in. Certain words become overused, misused.
Right.
Yeah.
But when it comes to mindfulness, it really is about just paying attention to what's happening right here, right now. And I think it's become so relevant and perhaps even overused because, we live in a society, in a culture that, we're so susceptible to distraction. Like there's so many things constantly vying for our attention. And so our ability to just focus our attention has become really limited. And we've become so dependent on these devices, which are wonderful. They're incredible resources.
Sure.
but they also begin to break down our ability to stay focused and to direct our attention when it's useful to, direct attention at something in particular. So, the teacher, John Kabat-Zinn, the doctor and teacher, he's done so much great work around this, and
Yeah.
he has
Oh,
a
yeah.
definition that I like to use, and that is, mindfulness is a state of being where we focus on the present moment on purpose without judgment.
Mm.
Hmm.
And so this on purpose piece is really crucial to what we're talking about, because what that really points us towards is an ability to really notice when we become distracted. So this is so relevant in caregiving because, when we're with a loved one or when we're with a patient, they can tell when we're not really present and when
Yes.
we're distracted by other things. And we all know what it feels like to be in the presence of someone who's highly distracted. It feels really different
Yeah.
than when we're
Yeah.
with someone who we know is paying really careful attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think of uh, presence, open-hearted presence, mindfulness in the context of caregiving as being the ultimate gift that we can give someone. It really creates the conditions for a sense of deep human connection, which I think most of us, that's ultimately what we're craving in this life. And
Absolutely.
especially when we're living with long-term chronic illness or terminal illness, that's such a blessing to receive that kind of presence and attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Your work at the Zen Hospice Center sounds like, my sense is that that was a turning point for you. Kind of what helped you realize that you
Mm.
needed to really give support to caregivers through your work there?
Well, I think I was kind of using myself as a sample of one, if you will. You know, the the work there, what I had learned made such a huge impact in my life. Throughout my life as a child and even into my, young adulthood and college years, I always had so much anxiety in my life.
Mm.
And I could see the impact it was having on my sense of well-being, but I didn't really know what to do about it. And when I started serving at Zen Hospice Project, I began cultivating the ability to just slow things down and to focus on my breath, focus on the physical sensations I was experiencing, the different ways emotions were manifesting in the body. And it created a steadiness in my life like I had never experienced before. And then, meanwhile, I was watching, these people who were coming to live with us at the end of their life.
Mm.
And, there's so much emotional chaos that they're dealing with as they're trying to
Right.
integrate the newness of, their terminal illness. And then, in addition, the family members were coming in and they were all understandably distraught. And
Sure.
in that environment, it's easy to have a high level of emotional reactivity to each other and the circumstances. And I was seeing how, as one of my teachers said, all it takes is one person in the room who's really grounded,
Mm.
who's really steady in their breath and in, just their feet on the floor. And that can really change the dynamic. So then it became really obvious, well, can we teach these techniques to caregivers upstream, before
Mm.
they reach the point where their loved one is in hospice or at the end of their life, so that when they reach that point, the conditioning has already happened. The tools, the skills are in place that they can draw on to really sustain their emotional resilience. So, it was really quite inspiring to meet some of these families and to have an understanding or an assumption, even, I'll call
Right.
it that,
Right.
of what would be supportive for them.
Yeah.
Is there a biggest, Roy? Is there a biggest emotional challenge that caregivers have to look look and face?
I think it's fear.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's fear of the unknown. So many caregivers, they find themselves in the role and they haven't necessarily chosen to be in the role, even though they choose to come back day after day. But they find themselves in the role unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And, they don't know what the they don't know what the trajectory is going to look like for their loved one. And so there's just so much uncertainty. And I think most of us have trouble holding uncertainty as it is. But then when a loved one is ill and they're uncomfortable in their body, when they're experiencing pain, when they're experiencing so much grief from the kinds of losses that are happening,
Mm.
each hour of every day, they can experience a lot of doubt and fear as to, how am I going to be able to handle this as it gets worse? Or, what's going to happen to me in my life when
Right.
my
Right.
spouse, when my parent,
Right.
gets to the end of this. So I think fear is a huge one for sure.
This is a beautiful book,
I think it's
Zen
in-
Caregiving. It's out from New World Library. We're talking to Roy Remer, the author and executive director of Zen Caregiving Project today here on Strategies for Living. We've already learned a lot. We've got a lot more to learn. Come back with us here on Strategies for Living.
Tune in daily, find the light. Healthy mind and spirits bright. Strategies for living strong. Feel the vibe, it won't go wrong. Body,
And welcome back. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. We couldn't be talking about a more important subject today, my humble opinion, than caregiving. And we're talking to Roy Remer, who has a brand new book out. It's a beautiful book. It's called Zen Caregiving. And I quoted Rosalind Carter at the beginning of the program, and I think she's exactly right.
Yeah.
This
We're all
is
going to be touched at some point.
there's
or
no
another.
question.
Yeah.
And it it may be caregiving for a time. Roy, Lauren and I had a personal experience with this here, in the recent past.
Yes.
I had a kind of for the first time, I had a real health emergency. And so Lauren was thrown in. She didn't sign up for it, but she became
Right.
she became a caregiver, and man, did she do a good job.
I don't know how zen I was.
Mm,
but
beautiful.
I attempted.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think maybe you and Roy must be talking. He must have sent you a copy of the
Oh,
book
well.
because you did a lot of the stuff that I read in here. So
That's great.
I just have to publicly say this is an important book,
is.
and we know it. We know it firsthand.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think you started mentioning, Roy, at the end of last segment, yes, the fear, but also the grief. And is that sort of the elephant in the room? What do we need to know and talk about grief? When do we need to explore that? How soon? And how do we begin to explore that in the process of caregiving?
Well, it's never too soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the earlier we really look at our own experience of loss and grief and give it its due, the easier future grief really becomes. And this is so critical for caregivers because caregivers have the double challenge of, supporting a loved one while they're dealing with loss and grief, while they're experiencing their own sense of loss and the resulting grief.
Yeah.
And, I'm convinced that if a caregiver hasn't really spent enough time thinking about their own losses and processing their own grief, then they're probably not going to be as supportive to their loved one
Mhm.
as they could otherwise be. It's when we witness loss and grief in others, it just naturally triggers our own emotions around loss and grief. And if those emotions feel surprising or new, then it can really throw us off. It can really knock us off our seat. And, it can evoke so many big emotions. So I think it's really useful to really begin to understand, for instance, what are the default emotions I experience around grief? Because we talk about grief as it's one particular emotion, but as you know,
Yeah,
it's not. It
Right.
can
it's a lot.
show up as, yeah, it can be anger, it can be confusion, it can probably the emotion most closely associated with grief is sadness, of course.
Sure.
Right.
But, some people
But
kind
then
of
there's
But then
freeze
anger.
in the
anger,
Then
face of
there's
grief.
fear.
anger. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's anger, exactly. And, grief has a funny way of leaking out no matter what. So, here we live in a culture that doesn't really want to address grief.
Yeah.
Grief's not all that much fun. It's meaningful in its own way, but it's not much fun. So we like to pretend that we don't have to deal with it right now. But it leaks out, it leaks out by unskillful behavior, whether it's anger or other types of behavior. And so I think it's really healthy. We train these volunteers each year to serve people who are living with chronic long-term illness and terminal illness. And, I say to them, if I'm going to send you to sit at the bedside of someone where so much is falling away, I really need to know that you've ventured into this territory and you've done your own work. I think this is really important. So it's never too soon. And, grief has a way of bringing us closer to each other.
Yes.
And
Yes. It's funny that way, isn't it?
I think it is. Yeah, it's beautiful that way, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think for a caregiver, it's actually okay to let the person you're caring for see your own vulnerabilities, whether, it's doubt or sadness, grief, whatever it is. I think that's okay. I think it helps them feel like this is what it means to be human, sooner or later. Now's my time, but, my beloved who's showing up to care for me, they'll be here too at some point.
Right.
So we're all kind of in this together.
We're all susceptible, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
That's
what
what it
are
means to be human.
back to mindfulness for a moment, because I do think that is so important. What are the immediate benefits, especially the short-term benefits of applying mindfulness in the caregiving process, Roy?
Well, we talk about three primary benefits, and these are calm, focused attention, and increased awareness. And so in the context of caregiving, these are really, really relevant.
Yeah.
So the calm is just, it's healthier. It's healthier for the caregiver. It's healthier for the one receiving care. And, it's easy to idealize these qualities, and sometimes they're really difficult to achieve. So I want to acknowledge that. But, there's been so much research into the benefits of mindfulness generally, but in the context of caregiving. And there's been some really interesting research around how if we can pause long enough for 3 deep intentional breaths, it has a way of calming the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms the body and mind. And so when we stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, it has these benefits. And, the other thing we sometimes forget about is as relational beings, we're just always responding to each other's energy. So we've all had the experience of being with someone who's highly agitated, and if we're not paying careful attention to our own process, we start to feel agitated as well. But the opposite is true. And, if I'm calm and grounded, I can have a calming and grounding effect on the person I'm with. So, if I'm calm, it can be very beneficial for the person I'm caring for. And, a calm and focused mind is a less exhausted mind for sure. I believe this to be true.
Yeah.
Um, Focused attention, has real obvious benefits. If I'm responsible for administering medications, it minimizes human error. I'm better able to track what maybe a doctor is telling my loved one. This becomes really important. And then increased awareness is really relevant because sooner or later, the person I'm caring for, they perhaps become nonverbal. And I can read the subtle cues of, you know, um, facial mannerisms or gestures,
Yeah.
contractions in the body. And if we're not aware of what's happening around us, we don't see these things and we can't respond. Or maybe we better respond to things in the environment that may be impacting their sense of well-being. And then the final point around these benefits, and this one in particular, increased awareness, is, this is also increased self-awareness. So, caregiving can be so exhausting,
Yes.
and we can perceive issues arising in the body earlier when we have a higher level of self-awareness. So much of this practice is dropping into the body, getting out of our head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we can pay better attention to what's happening in the physical realm.
Talking about that exhaustion piece, you hear the term compassion fatigue.
Burnout.
Right.
Burnout. What is compassion fatigue, and what do we need to know about it? What do we need to understand? What causes it, and that type of thing?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to just differentiate between just physical exhaustion because we're working so hard and compassion fatigue. I think they're related, but they're a little different. And compassion fatigue is really the sense or attitude that no matter what I do, it's really not making a difference here.
Yeah.
And that can be distressing, and that can actually close the heart, and compassion can begin to fade, hence the compassion fatigue. So in those situations, which are common and natural, I think it's useful for caregivers to just remind themselves that even small gestures of care and attention can make a big difference. And, there's something we talk about which helps address compassion fatigue, and that's what's referred to as moral elevation. And, there are so many good people out there in the world doing good things. And if we turn our attention to what other people are doing, that really has a way of elevating us and making us feel a sense of wellness and uplifted. And so that can restart or regenerate our compassion when it begins to wane. One of the causes of compassion fatigue is just overwhelming suffering that we witness.
Yeah.
So if our loved one is dealing with some kind of intractable pain, we are more susceptible to compassion fatigue. It's hard work watching a loved one suffer physically, emotionally,
Absolutely.
even mentally.
Absolutely.
So it takes its toll.
We are learning so much today from Roy Remer. The book, you got to get this book. We're not going to have enough time to cover the things that we need to cover, but you can continue the conversation with Roy Remer. How do you do that? Are you giving us his number? No. I want you to go get the book, Zen Caregiving, because there's so much here. It's out from New World Library. It's how to care for yourself while caring for others. It's called Zen Caregiving. Roy Remer. But don't go away, because we've got some time left here on Strategies for Living. We've got more to learn from our life strategist today, Roy Remer. We'll be back. More strategies to come.
We all have problems every day. We all need help along the way. We We need strategies, strategies, strategies for living radio.
And welcome back into Strategies for Living. Lauren Leon McMillian, David McMillian with Roy Remer today. The name of the book is Zen Caregiving. It's an important book. You're going to want to get it. It's out from New World Library. It's just out. And it's how to care for yourself while caring for others.
So, Roy, like you mentioned earlier, so many times caregivers are very busy. And while I can really appreciate the philosophy and the depth of Zen and how you can bring that to caregiving, we are also strategies for living. And you have some really good practical tips. So if somebody's listening and they're a caregiver right now, what's something you can give them tangibly that could help them now?
Sure. I love this question. The book is inspired by this rich tradition, but it's not a book where I'm teaching Zen doctrine. So I'm trying to offer folks practices that they can integrate into their daily activities, the activities that they're already having to engage in. And so just to give a couple examples, let's see, the first one that comes to mind is there's something that we call the stop practice. And stop, S-T-O-P, the S is really about just pausing in the midst of some activity. And sometimes we can't stop what we're doing, but we can pause the mind. And once we do that, then we can simply take a breath. And this puts us back into the body. And what's happening in the body is present moment experience. It can't be otherwise. And so this kind of interrupts things like unuseful thoughts, for instance, or, persistent negative thinking. And once we stop, take a breath, then we observe. So what's happening here? Like, what is causing the agitation? What's the situation I'm in? And once we have a chance to sort of take note of what's happening in this moment, then we proceed. We proceed from a place of greater awareness, more groundedness. And this is the way we slow things down and we enter into a situation with more skill and just more awareness. So the stop practice I have found to be really, really useful. The next thing I'd like to mention is, you may be a caregiver who is simply showing up for a parent to help them do chores around the house, laundry, washing dishes, etc.
Yeah.
And let's say you're washing the dishes. This is a time where it's so easy for thoughts of the future or ideas, regrets about the past to kind of drift into our thinking. But when you notice that you're anticipating the future, or perhaps you're ruminating on the past, can you just simply return to the sensation of warm water, washing over your hands, the sensation of the suds as you're holding a plate or a cup? What's it like when you begin to rinse the suds, off the plate itself? Or can you feel the weight of this object in your hand? It's really about returning your attention to what's happening right here, right now. And this has just a real therapeutic value because, so much of our thinking just isn't really very useful and it can trigger big emotions. And so we should remember that we have control over our thoughts. We're not the victim of our thoughts. And, planning for the future, reviewing the past, that's all important. But we can make a choice. So using these sorts of tasks, whether it's washing the dishes, folding the laundry, assisting someone with their feeding. So these are just a couple of techniques that people can use to cultivate mindful awareness. No need to run out and buy a meditation cushion.
No, just be right
you
here
could.
now, right?
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Be here right now.
Let's talk about something that I think is pretty practical. And I say this from spending 30 years in the counseling room and talking with people who were caregiving and, trying to gently say, you've got to take care of yourself.
Right.
And people saying, but wait a minute, whoever it is, mom or grandmom or dad or whoever they're caring for needs me 24/7, and it's selfish. It's selfish for me to prioritize my stuff over somebody. What do you say? What do you say to that?
Well, the example I use in the book is you can drive a car if the fuel gauge is not functioning, but you can only drive it for so long. And sooner or later, you're going to run out of gas and it's going to cause problems for you and your passengers, right? So I think when it comes to our physical, emotional well-being, it's a little like that. You can put off your self-care, but sooner or later, not tending to your own needs is going to cause problems, not just for you, but for the person you're caring for. And again, I don't want to underestimate or minimize how difficult it is for caregivers to make space in their life to take care of themselves. But the practices in the book I think of as moment-to-moment self-care. So it's not about, going for a massage or, taking a weekend away, taking yourself out for a nice meal. It's, what can I integrate into my daily activities on a moment-to-moment basis? So we see this where caregivers, they put off their own needs, and sooner or later they get sick and go down, and then it just creates a whole other set of problems. So I think of the kind of self-care that I'm talking about as an insurance policy. It just helps make sure that, we're sustainable in the role, that we can stay in the role for the duration of, however long our loved one needs us. And I think it just makes a lot more sense. And, these practices enhance one's sense of well-being, even in difficult, challenging circumstances.
I can't help but think, after all that you've witnessed and all of your experiences alongside caregiving and then as a caregiver, what do you believe caregiving kind of reveals about the deeper purposes of our lives?
And you got 1 minute to answer that question.
Well, Lauren, you named it, early on when we were talking about Rosalind Carter. This is what it means to be human. We care for each other. And I want caregivers to remember that, people are paying attention, and the lessons that you're learning from this challenging situation, you get wisdom from this, and this is wisdom that others need. And so it's the way we just support those coming up behind us. Such a noble act, being a caregiver, noble endeavor.
Beautiful, beautiful book Roy Remer has given the world. It's called Zen Caregiving, How to Care for Yourself While Caring for Others. The book is out from New World Library, available wherever you buy books. And we'll be back to wrap up our conversation today on strategies with life strategist Roy Remer. Come back with us. And welcome back in. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. Lauren Leon McMillian, David McMillian, and Roy Remer, our life strategist today. Beautiful book out from New World Library. It's called Zen Caregiving, How to Care for Yourself While Caring for Others. Roy, I wish we had another 3 hours, and we wouldn't be able to, we hadn't even scratched the surface, and I don't think we would with 3 hours either. You've got this book packed. But what do you really want people to take away from especially our conversation here today?
Well, I'd like people to remember that even when their caregiving role feels impossible, that they won't survive, that actually they can survive and even thrive in the role. There's so much room for growth and evolution in the role of being a caregiver. And it can be as simple as just pausing long enough to take one deep breath, place a hand on the chest over the heart, and just take a moment to breathe and then begin again. It sounds simple, but it's the key to everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Roy Remer, thank you so much for this wonderful book. And thank you for being a great life strategist here on Strategies for Living. I hope we can do this again.
Thank you both. I really appreciate your work, and it's nice to be here with you.
Thank you. And folks, you don't have to stop the conversation with Roy Remer. You can continue it, as I said, by getting a copy of Zen Caregiving, How to Care for Yourself While Caring for Others, out from New World Library. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you being with us here on Strategies for Living, and we appreciate our sponsors who make it all possible. The Robinson Film Center, Azalea Cleaners, Pintail Roofing, the Balanced Life Wellness Center, Fertitta's Delicatessen, home of the Muffy, SRT Sales Training, Uprising Addiction Center, and Mira Direct Primary Care. If today were the last day of your life, you only had one more phone call that you could make, who would you call? And what would you say? And why are you waiting? Make the call. For Lauren McMillian, for Roy Remer, I'm David McMillan. We'll see you next time right here on Strategies for Living.